ERIC is a widely searched digital library of nearly 1.9 million education-related journal articles and reports, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. ERIC selects materials for the collection in two ways: through the online submission system used by individual authors to submit their work to ERIC, and through a formal source selection process for journals and organizations producing reports in the education field. If you are a journal or book publisher, or an organization that produces reports or sponsors conferences in the education field, your materials are potential sources of new content for ERIC. This video will help you determine if your materials are a good fit to be considered for the collection. Twice a year, in the spring and fall, ERIC reviews journals and sources of conference papers, reports, and books as potential candidates for inclusion in ERIC. ERIC uses the selection policy as a guide when evaluating samples of recommended content. Materials in ERIC must meet the selection standard of being directly related to one or more of the education topics in the IES authorizing legislation. ERIC considers new resources that are education research, such as a journal focused on research in teacher education, a conference paper from an education association, or a fact sheet containing research data. We are looking for materials that include citations, original analyses of data, and well-formed arguments. ERIC does not index textbooks, lesson plans, personal opinion narratives, or resources focused on subject matter alone. For example, ERIC would not select a chemistry journal, but may select a journal about teaching chemistry. ERIC has 5 overarching collection development goals that guide source selection. In addition to ensuring that ERIC sources produce education research, the goals also include increasing the number of peer-reviewed full-text sources, increasing the amount of rigorous and relevant full-text gray literature, limiting citation-only indexing to the most relevant, substantive materials, and prioritizing sources with content including participants in the United States. With these goals in mind, ERIC conducts a rigorous review of sources against the policy's selection criteria. For inclusion in the collection, resources must meet acceptable levels of quality based on completeness, integrity, substantive merit, and the utility or importance of the materials. ERIC also considers the peer review process and will consider whether access to the full text is available for users. The language criteria states that the articles in a journal must be in English or have a high-quality English translation. For sources originating in a country where English is not the primary language, the source's website should be available in English, and the publisher must provide ERIC the full text for indexing purposes and to verify the language of the content. Materials must be current and published on an ongoing basis, and the source should have at least a 3-year history of scholarly publishing before applying to ERIC. Sources must publish regularly, have current materials on their website, and provide content to ERIC as it is published. Materials should be made available in an acceptable format for indexing. Lastly, publishers of potential new journals and other sources are subject to an evaluation of their policies and processes. Sponsorship by a professional organization is preferred. If your source is not selected for indexing, you may reapply in 2 years. Sources will not be reviewed more than 3 times in a 10-year period. If your source is selected for indexing, you will be asked to sign an agreement with ERIC. The agreement identifies the resources to be indexed, specifies alternatives for how ERIC will obtain your materials, and provides options for the display of full text. Once the agreement has been signed by both parties, ERIC will begin indexing your materials. Do you have a journal or other resource you would like to have indexed in ERIC? First, download the policy from the ERIC website and review it carefully. If you think your material meets the policy, send us an email that contains the journal title or the name of the organization that produces reports and their web address. For journals, please also send the ISSN. For additional information, check out the following links.